The classroom buzzed with casual noise as students took turns talking about their families. Parents who worked normal jobs, relatives who fixed cars, taught school, or ran small businesses. Nothing unusual. Nothing that made anyone stop and listen until it was her turn. She stood up, small hands clenched at her sides, and said with quiet certainty that her grandpa used to be a Navy SEAL. For a moment, there was silence. Then the room broke into laughter. Soft at first, then louder, sharper, like a wave she hadn't expected. A few kids exchanged looks, some grinned, others whispered. Even the teacher smiled politely, the kind of smile adults use when they think a child is pretending. She felt heat rush to her face, but didn't sit down. She repeated it, clearer this time, saying he had served, that he had protected people, that he was a hero. The laughter didn't stop. Someone joked that her grandfather could barely walk. Another said SEALs didn't look that old. The words stung more than she thought they would. She glanced toward the back of the room, where her grandfather sat quietly, hands resting on his cane, eyes lowered. He didn't react. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even look up. That silence confused her more than the laughter. She had seen the scars on his arms, the way he woke up early every morning, the way he watched doors and windows without thinking. She knew he was telling the truth. As she sat down, heart pounding, she made a silent promise to herself. Even if no one else believed her, she would. Away from the noise of the classroom, her grandfather lived a life so quiet it almost disappeared into the background. His house was small, clean, and carefully ordered, every object placed with purpose. He woke before sunrise every day, not because he needed to, but because his body no longer understood sleeping late. The girl often found him sitting at the kitchen table in the early morning light, hands wrapped around a mug he barely drank from, eyes alert as if he were waiting for something that never came. He never talked about the past. When she asked him about the Navy, he smiled softly and changed the subject, telling her stories about fishing or fixing old engines instead. But there were signs he couldn't hide. Thin white scars crossed his forearms. His posture stayed straight even when age weighed him down. He always chose the seat facing the door, always noticed small sounds others ignored. These were habits, not memories, and they came from a life he had learned never to explain. After the laughter at school, the girl asked him why people didn't believe her. He didn't sound angry when he answered. He told her that the loudest truths were often the weakest ones, and that real strength didn't need an audience. Then he reached into a drawer she had never seen opened before. Inside was a single worn object, old and heavy, its surface smoothed by time. He didn't show it to her for long. He just held it, then put it away again. That night, he sat alone, staring at the dark window, knowing the world had moved on without remembering him. Somewhere far away, others still did. A few days later, the school announced a special visit connected to the nearby base. It was meant to be routine, nothing more than a scheduled inspection and a short presentation about discipline and service. Students were told to sit straight, teachers reminded them to behave, and flags were carefully placed along the walls. No one connected the announcement to the laughter from earlier in the week. To most, it was just another event to break the normal schedule. That morning, the girl noticed her grandfather was quieter than usual. He dressed carefully, choosing a plain jacket and pressing it flat as if preparing for something important, though he never said why. When they arrived, he took a seat at the back again, his cane resting neatly against his leg. His eyes moved slowly across the room, not with curiosity, but with familiarity. The sound of footsteps in the hallway changed everything. They were measured, heavy, and perfectly in rhythm. The door opened, and several men entered wearing crisp uniforms, their presence instantly commanding the room. Conversation stopped. Teachers straightened. Even the students sensed something different. These weren't ordinary visitors. They carried themselves with quiet confidence, The kind that didn't need to announce authority. The men didn't smile or speak right away. Their eyes scanned the room with purpose, not looking for attention, but for someone specific. The girl felt her heart race as one of them paused, gaze fixed toward the back. For the first time, her grandfather lifted his head. In that moment, the laughter from days before felt distant and wrong. Something unspoken passed between them, and the room held its breath, unaware that everything was about to change. The shift in the room was immediate and unmistakable. One of the men stopped walking, his posture snapping rigid as his eyes locked onto the old man at the back. Without a word spoken, the rest of the unit followed. Boots aligned, shoulders squared, all attention focused on a single figure no one else had taken seriously. The sound of chairs scraping and whispers died instantly. The old man stood slowly, leaning on his cane, surprised more by the moment than by their presence. The leader of the unit stepped forward and addressed him with a name no one in the room recognized, a tone filled with respect rather than rank. It wasn't loud, but it carried. The girl felt her breath catch as she realized they weren't honoring age or kindness. They were honoring history, the man explained, briefly and carefully, that her grandfather had once trained others, had walked into places that never appeared in reports, had brought people home who were never meant to return. No medals were shown. No stories were told in detail. They didn't need to be. The old man simply nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, and asked them to stand down. They obeyed instantly. In that silence, the truth finally settled, heavier than any laughter that had come before. No one spoke after the unit stepped back. The laughter that once filled the room felt distant, almost embarrassing, like a mistake no one wanted to remember making. Students stared at the floor. Teachers stood still, unsure of what to say or do. The weight of what had just happened settled slowly, pressing down on everyone who had doubted, smiled politely, or laughed out loud. The truth hadn't arrived with noise or explanation. It had arrived with respect. The grandfather adjusted his grip on the cane and gave a small nod, not in pride, but in closure. He didn't explain himself. He didn't correct anyone. He didn't need to. The men who mattered already understood. The unit turned and left the room the same way they had entered, controlled, quiet, and disciplined, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But everything had changed. The girl watched them go, her chest tight with emotion she didn't yet have words for. She looked up at her grandfather, expecting to see triumph, but instead saw peace. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent thank you for believing when belief had cost her comfort. In that moment, she realized something important. Respect wasn't demanded. It was earned quietly, often unseen. As the room slowly returned to motion, no one laughed anymore. They didn't need lessons or warnings. They had witnessed one already. The story ended without applause, without speeches, without celebration. Just silence, deep and lasting, louder than any laughter that had come before.